Yeah, I'm good. Okay, so here we are. It is Friday. You're here on Litvak Leadership Live, and I am here with, dare I call him my new friend, but I think this is going to become a lifelong relationship for the two of us, because in the short while that I've spoken with Mr. Robert Bruce, do you say Adolph or Adolph?
Adolph. I respond to anything.
Okay, Mr. Robert Bruce Adolph. I got to tell you that this guy is the real deal, and he knows leadership. As we were just in the green room, he was telling me that he has reached the point in life almost where he believes that he knows enough to know that he doesn't know. And I didn't say it as eloquently as you did. Why don't you say your own quote?
Well, I didn't even know I was saying anything that would be quotable. Okay, I'd like to think that I know enough now at my age to know what I don't know, and that means two things. One, to be just a little bit humble. Take your ego, put it in your pocket, and leave it there. Since our topic is leadership, I think that's probably one of the single greatest mistakes I made in my early Army career, and that was that I had a very difficult time getting my ego under control. I found out years later it's not an unusual problem, but it is something you must master if you're going to be a good leader. Good leaders that have out of control egos aren't.
No, exactly. Absolutely. So to introduce Robert appropriately to the audience, Robert's a retired U.S. Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel and United Nations Chief Security Advisor that has lived and worked in 15 different countries and on 4 continents while visiting another 54. Former infantry staff sergeant, commanded twice in the Special Forces, twice in military intelligence. He is a survivor and victim of jihadist terror vehicular suicide attack in Baghdad in August of 2003. He's also the former chief of the Middle East and North Africa at UN headquarters in New York. He holds graduate degrees in both international affairs and national security studies and strategies and so much more. And now he's writing poetry and looking to go back to school for creative writing. So we are going to have a lively conversation today. So Robert, welcome officially. I would have to read pages and pages to give you your due for an introduction, but that's where we're going to leave it at the moment. So tell me first.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome. How do you define leadership? You had to distill it down.
I was afraid you're going to ask something like that, and I don't believe it has an easy definition.
All right.
The military takes a different view on leadership, then business takes a different view on leadership, and communities take a different view on leadership. So I think there's different kinds of leadership in different environments. So I think it's largely dependent upon the cultural environment in which you're in. But there are some commonalities. And those are those commonalities. I think first, a good leader must be first a good person. In all my years of service, 26 years in the American Special Forces and military intelligence, 15 years with the United Nations, I never met a good leader that wasn't first a good person. That's the base of the pillar. It doesn't get any stronger than that. If you're a good person, you got a shot at being a good leader. If you're not, you won't.
How do you define a good person?
Someone who has moral standing and ethical beliefs. For example, most professions, law, soldiers, priests, police officers, have a body of ethics that they follow. These are rules that they follow all day, every day, and many of them inculcate those rules into their self. Morality generally is given us is subjective, culturally dependent, but can sometimes be defined by what you and I might call some knowledge about what doing the right thing means. Now, what does doing the right thing mean? It'll be culturally specific.
Sure.
But within a Western cultural context between you and me, you understand what doing the right thing means. It means acting honorably. It means having a love of the truth, basing your opinions in facts, listening to others with an open mind and open heart. That's just a start, but that's the start of being a good person. And what's most important, the single highest human value that all of us share, I think you might agree, is compassion. Compassion, kindness. If you have a compassionate leader, that means something to everyone who is led.
So let's talk about compassion a second. And I agree with you 100%. And I say that as someone who has struggled with compassion over my lifetime, for the simple reason that I've seen so many people just not try to improve themselves, not engage to improve themselves, or grab every excuse they can as to why something went wrong, as opposed to taking personal accountability. How do you balance compassion and personal accountability?
Actually, I don't see the conflict. I don't find a contradiction in being compassionate and being personally accountable for your actions. In fact, I don't see them as being oppositional concepts. I see them very much as part and parcel of the same thing. It's integrated into you, your personality. If you are a compassionate person, it's very likely you're accountable for your actions as well.
So someone who continues to make excuses for themselves, would you say that that we should have compassion for them?
Yes.
Okay.
Compassion is how can I say this? It's a humanistic lubricant. Unless you're a sociopath, and there are those that simply are never going to have the empathy, and we can talk a little bit about empathy later, because compassion and empathy are two sides of the same coin. The bottom line is, unless you're a sociopath, if I'm acting in a way to you which is both compassionate,
all right,
and if I am demonstrating kindness toward you and an understanding of your circumstances, that's going to be understood by all human beings cross-culturally all around the globe. And you're talking to somebody that served in the United Nations for 15 years.
All right.
Okay? Every country, every culture, every language, every color palette. And it's universal. Kindness works.
So when we talk about morality in leadership, we know that there's the Western morality that you referred to, and then I look at so I have friends who live in Israel. I have family that lives in Israel, and the challenges that Israelis have with various Arabs of different types, where there is continual conflict, and one side says that they are being moral for what they are attempting to do, and the other side says they are being moral in their actions. How do we look at those two divergent moralities and decide what is actually moral in a leadership standpoint?
It's unfortunate you asked me that question. My first master's degree is in Middle Eastern Studies. I've lived in Israel. All right. I used to be responsible for security in Gaza, the West Bank, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. I wrote my first thesis on the Palestine Liberation Organization.
Okay.
So I know a very great deal about that conflict.
All right.
I would have to say that unfortunately, I know the truth of David Ben-Gurion. I read the book written by Ilan Papp, which was called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. I've read the history of David Ben-Gurion. And like I said, I lived in Israel, so I've talked to many average Israelis as well. I also dealt almost on a daily basis with Palestinians of all stripes, all, how can I say this? There is truth on both sides. There are facts on both sides. The question of morality, though, goes to the question of equivalency. Is there a moral equivalency between the Zionist perspective, is what you and I might understand to be the Zionist perspective, and I would have to tell you to go back and read 3 different books in order to understand what Zionism actually is, and what the Palestinian position is, since what the Arabs call the Nakba. Okay, and the Nakba in Arabic means the disaster. The disaster was for them the establishment of the state of Israel. I would have to say that there is right on both sides. I understand the Israeli perspective. I understand the Zionist perspective. I know what happened with that history. Okay, I also understand the Palestinian perspective. And I think we're going to probably, unfortunately, if I go any further on this, we'll go into one of my lectures and I'll put everybody to sleep. I actually have a 3-hour lecture on the Israel-Palestine conflict going back to 1947. Let's see if we can go to a different.
Okay. Sure. Well, we will go in another direction, and I guess I just brought that up because in my Bible reading time, I've been reading through the life of Abraham lately, and reading about Ishmael and reading about Isaac. And it's really dawned on me now as I guess I will call myself a middle-aged man, that they were brothers. They were half brothers, but they were brothers nonetheless. Yes. And that is something that today in society we do not look at. That we look at the Jews and the Israelis and the Arabs as mortal enemies, and it's just got me thinking. So let me ask you this then, from a leadership perspective, what role do you think one's faith holds in how it influences them as a leader?
I think, and this is going to be tough for some people to hear, I think faith, and this is based on lots of years of experience in the field in different countries. So you can take Christianity off the table for the time being. You can talk about any faith. Faith is very often an impediment to finding resolutions to intractable conflicts. If you have, let's go to the Palestinian and the Israeli issue.
Sure.
Okay? 2 different faiths. And those faiths are made to be diametrically opposed and are based in belief systems, which require no proofs and do not necessarily respect compromise. If you're looking for a peaceful outcome in any negotiation, some compromise on both sides is going to be necessary, meaning that both sides have to walk away from the table after the agreement is signed, being a bit unhappy.
Yes.
However, it serves a greater good. So at least in my experience, when you sit down at a negotiating table and you start talking about conflict resolution, I would like to take faith and put that aside and talk about facts, differing perspectives, certainly, taking a hard look at issues like justice. Because peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of justice. And if we start with that understanding, we start with an understanding that we're talking about justice for everybody. So justice for the Palestinians, justice for the Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's your best road toward getting to yes.
Interesting. So when you look at communicating strategy to those who report to you, who you are leading, all strategy cannot be communicated because sometimes those that you lead, it's too much for them to either comprehend, process, whatever. But you still need to communicate enough of the strategy to keep people engaged. Where do you draw the line?
I disagree with your premise.
Okay, good.
I disagree with your premise. A strategy is defined by ways, ends, and means. Those can be explained, and in rather simple terms. People have a tendency, they throw the word strategy around. Okay, I may be the only person you've ever met that has a master's degree in strategy.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
All
so
right.
I can go into great technical detail on strategy development, but there is a mechanism by which you can develop a strategy and then explain it in relatively simple terms. But it takes a lot of work to do that. So the first principle of war, for example, is objective. Objective. First and foremost, you must know what you want to do. It's also, interestingly, the first principle of everything else. Whatever you hope to accomplish in life, for yourself, or for groups, as a nation, first and foremost, you must know what you're trying to do. What do you hope to achieve? And if you can put that, and it takes a lot of work to do this, put it in one sentence. Put it in one clear, concise, objective sentence. And if you can do that, that sentence will drive everything else. And it can be explained.
That as being one of your strengths. Just talking to you, can you get that concise on something?
It takes a lot of work, but yes.
Okay.
In developing military strategies, for example. But I have to tell you, the military strategy was just how I came by this skill set. So I did a second master's degree in national security studies and strategy. Once that skill set was integrated, I can take that skill set and apply it anywhere, to anything. Business, pleasure, okay? Forget the military for a minute. Politics, whatever you hope to achieve in life, personally, whatever you hope to achieve in life, first define your objective. Then look at the ways and means of achieving it. And once you've defined the ways and means, there's other methods to go about analyzing your strategy for achieving it. I get a kick out of watching places like CNN, and they say this person is a Democratic strategist, this person is a Republican strategist. Right. But none of them define what a strategy truly is. And if you sat one of them down at my kitchen table and asked them to make a strategy, they couldn't do it.
No. So define for everyone the difference between ways and means. Because as you're saying ways, ends, and means, I'm realizing that to me, ways and means have the same definition. So I know there's more to it.
Means very often is just money. Okay? But there's other kinds of capital. There's political capital, for example. And there's personal capital. For example, there were some times when I was working in the bush in Africa, okay? You make relationships. You establish friendships. You talk to people. And when you walk through a door, there can be existent a degree of capital between me and my friend, the person that I'm working with. Once that relationship is developed, that's a kind of capital. That's a kind of means. Ways are methods.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So means, ways. The analysis is done by looking at suitability, feasibility, or acceptability. Those three things. And then you take a look at things called branches and sequels. But this is a highly technical, how can I say this? It's a technical skill set It's relatively simple to explain, but doing it takes a lot of time, effort, and energy, and most of it's brain power.
So when you look at the political landscape today, without talking specifically about Democrats or Republicans, but comparing the tenor of the communication that is occurring throughout the last several years, okay, even during both the Obama and the Trump administrations versus, say, during the Carter or Reagan administrations, the lack of ability to get along in the last 12 years versus how the various political parties would fight during the day and then sit down together friendly at night and cut deals. What do you think has occurred that has changed the way our political leaders lead publicly?
I just had an article published in Holland about just that topic. If I didn't send it to you,
I will have to
sorry.
look at everything you sent me. I will look again.
Okay. Well, here's my answer or my take on that. Okay. I was a lifelong conservative.
Sure.
Okay. So I start from that position. But unfortunately, what I see now in the Republican Party is enormous, how can I say this, disarray.
There is disarray.
It is an enormous disarray. If I were a Republican strategist, I wouldn't know where to go. What does the Republican Party stand for today? What is their objective? What are the ways and means that the Republican Party goes about achieving its ends? And I couldn't answer that question.
But can you answer that question for the Democrats, though?
I can in a way, yes, better. There is within the Democratic polity, if you will, and we're talking about a continuum here, okay?
Oh, yeah.
On one end of this continuum, we have Antifa, for example, okay?
Yes.
And on the other end are perhaps the militia groups, the Proud Boys, and perhaps others that have the QAnon believers, those people that have embraced the ideas associated with a well-discredited conspiracy theory. The current Secretary General of the United Nations says we're in a crisis of irrationality. And I have observed much the same thing. I have actually lost friends based on my published works. I've had friends unfriend me on Facebook or tell me an email. They never want to talk to me again. We have gone from being adversaries to being enemies.
Yes. And it's just ridiculous that people have lost the ability to disagree and have conversations about their disagreement. And as someone who's in social media, I actually blame social media for it because people do not get face to face and have conversations. They just post snippets and comments all day long and, surround themselves with people in an echo chamber.
So do I. I blame social media, but there is a larger culprit.
All right. What is it?
The corporate media companies.
Yeah.
Well, I'll take, and this was one of the topics of the article I just published in Holland. The editor there asked me to explain, if I could, the polarization that was ongoing in the United States. So I had to take a very, very hard, objective look at it. One of my skill sets was I was taught to be a psychological operations officer in the United States Army. I attended the course. I wasn't very good at it, but I did learn how to recognize propaganda. What I saw Rupert Murdoch doing, and Roger Ailes, who used to be their director of programming, he developed something called niche reporting. And in niche reporting, you give those reports to conservative peoples. You tell them what they want to hear. and they pay you for it. So through niche reporting, Fox News has politically weaponized their programs like Sean Hannity, former Lou Dobbs, Laura Ingraham, and others.
Right. Okay.
And I get a kick out of Fox News when they say things like fair and balanced. Their motto is fair and balanced. They're everything but fair and balanced. There's nothing fair or balanced about what Fox News does on their opinion programs. They're designed to do one thing, and they feed conservative Americans propaganda.
But don't CNN and MSNBC do the exact same thing? Just on the other end of the spectrum?
No. That's the fallacy. That is the fallacy. MSNBC is interested in making money, as is CNN. You may remember during the Walter Cronkite period of American news.
Sure. I used to have one, but go ahead.
Okay, I was a little older. But we used to watch the news. And
right.
ABC, NBC, and CBS all gave us the news every night.
Right.
And it didn't provide spin. It didn't give us a perspective. It provided us, and all those newsrooms back in the 1960s lost money for their respective corporations.
Right.
They all lost money.
Yeah.
But they all tried to tell the truth, and they all engaged in something you and I would know as journalistic ethics. Now, all that has changed. CNN still goes about trying to report and still attempts to provide journalistic ethics by engaging in journalistic ethics, and still provides some degree of the truth. However, the editorial policies that are invaded are designed to tell people things that they want to hear in terms of just making money. It's about making money.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily have a political slant, except this is the level of complexity we get into.
Okay.
There's always an exception. The exception in this case, I lost my train of thought. And I knew I was going to lose my train of thought. Okay.
We were saying you were saying that Fox News is niche reporting, and my response was, well, so is CNN and MSNBC, and you said no, they're not.
No, they're not.
Jaw drop, by the way.
No. I understand, because in order for Fox News to make their case, okay, and here they had common cause with former President Trump, okay, in calling the mainstream media. By the way, there is no such thing as mainstream media. It means different things to different people.
Sure.
Using glittering generalities.
Okay.
By taking and creating commentary whereby they discredit those people that are on the other channels and make money doing it. So essentially, we're talking about making money. But the means, the ends are different. Their strategies are different. Fox News makes money by telling conservative Americans what they want to hear. It's designed to do it.
And doesn't CNN and MSNBC do the same thing, just to a different group of people?
This is the point. This is the point that I lost.
Okay.
If you look at the history of what those people that are journalists go to the journalism schools. You look at the University of Missouri, which is one of the best journalism schools in America.
Okay.
Those people that come out of those schools almost always have a left-leaning bias by the time they graduate. Not just the journalism schools. No. Hang on. There's a difference between corporate policy and individual unconscious bias. So I can be an editor over at CNN or MSNBC, and I can have a bias toward the left-leaning side of the spectrum. That's understood. And it's also human. All human beings are biased in one way or another.
Absolutely. Everyone's biased. No doubt about it.
And many times that bias is unconscious. We don't even think about it. Also, people that go to college very often are exposed to the wider world. Their perspectives of necessity are going to change with that wider perspective. They're going to see more, they're going to understand more. Maybe they're going to be sensitized to that, some of the problems in the wider world that many high school graduates aren't.
But doesn't it seem like so many of the professors and administrators and those that lead our educational institutions
who are all college graduates
are left-leaning?
They're all college. If you get more education, if you understand more, if you read more, and if you continue learning throughout your life, I understand things now after 15 years with the United Nations and living and working in 15 different countries that most people don't.
I agree with that.
I have a wider perspective. I didn't go out and look for that. It happened to me as a consequence of my life and the things I ended up doing. And what I'm telling you is that if you go to college and you continue going, you get an undergraduate degree, you get a master's degree, maybe get a PhD, you'll go further and further left with that understanding. Now, that bias, unconscious or not, influences who we are and the decisions we make. There's a huge difference between that unconscious bias and a specific strategy developed by Fox News that tells untruths, conspiracy theories to unsuspecting conservatives in America, those consumers. If you take a look at the people that desecrated our Capitol building on the 6th of last month, I would bet you that most of them were consumers of that propaganda that's foisted on us by Fox News.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that since we're civil human beings, because I think that there is a lot of hate speech and inciting individuals to riot that we saw this past summer that was being professed by those on the left. I won't even call them Democrats. Okay, but
remember I started this conversation with you by saying we're on a continuum.
Oh, and the continuum, I think, is actually where it all comes together in the end.
What I'm telling you is that the real enemy is fanaticism. The real enemy is extremism.
I'll agree with that.
Our best friend for finding a way forward is reason, rationality, and compromise. That's our best way forward. The answer is not by whatever Antifa is trying to sell, and it's not whatever the right, the Proud Boys are selling. I got to tell you, both are out there. Both are wrong. I'm a huge fan of rationality, reason, truth-telling.
So let's leap in another direction that I think is still linear. I heard someone on the radio say the other day, and folks, we've gone 34 minutes, but Robert, if you're willing to go a little bit longer, I want to talk to you about the next topic. That we are leaving the age of political leaders and entering the age of the dominance of businesses and corporations leading the United States and ultimately the world. What do you say to that?
I mean, there's a very strong case for it. There's a very strong case for it. If you look at the wealthiest people around the world, not just the United States, we're looking at the global 1%. And that global 1% have enormous control of enormous wealth. And with that wealth comes enormous influence. Now, that means that it's up to those individuals, whether they are ethical, moral, how they use that influence. And being human beings, like all of us, we're imperfect.
We are.
And the fact is, yes, and those imperfections are multiplied many times by all that money. It makes the situation worse. There's only one thing that can balance that spreadsheet. Only one.
All right.
That's government. So here I would disagree with Ronald Reagan, okay? I understand why Ronald Reagan said or felt that the government was the problem. Sometimes the government is the solution. And in this case, it is. The counterpoint, the counterbalance to the huge corporations in America, which
Right.
have a responsibility not to the nation, not to you and me, not to the citizenry, but to their shareholders.
Exactly.
No, I'm sorry. Now, the people that benefit from that, okay, love the system as it is. But the fact is, it does not serve a very significant proportion of our countrymen. It does not and will not. So, one, to answer your question directly, there's a very strong case to be made that we're looking at corporate government in future. Okay? It will be, how can I say this? It'll be in the closet. It will be behind the curtain, as it is now.
As it
If
is
you look,
now. Exactly.
as very much as it is now. Okay, we're already there in part, and those people that have enormous wealth can use that money to. I'm sorry, I'm going to use an unfriendly phrase, and that is they can use it to buy as much political influence as they need that is going to service their new class. That new class I call the new nobility.
All right. Sure.
Yeah. No, I just published an op-ed with the Tampa Bay Times on just that topic, the new nobility.
So, and it's interesting you bring that up, and I'm going to link it to something you said earlier when you talked about conspiracy theorists and conspiracy theories. Many people have said that those who believe that there is this small group of people dictating behind the curtain what's happening in various governments, and when I say small group, it's maybe
I didn't say that.
People.
No, I didn't say that. That's
okay. What did you say?
No. I think that's crazy. Okay.
Okay.
I think what we have is we have a global 1%. And if you have enormous wealth, you also have enormous influence. Influence does not necessarily connote control. I choose my words very carefully. Okay. Control and influence, two different things. However, that influence can make itself felt mightily over long periods of time, and I think it's being felt in the United States in a very negative way.
So, for how long do you believe this influence has been overarching into the leadership of our country?
I think it has. It's always been there. It's always been there, but I think
always is a long time.
I think it's always been there, but it's become more pronounced with the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, which essentially said, the Supreme Court said the corporations have the same rights as individuals, which I think is full goose bozo, like Robin Williams used to say. That's nuts. Individuals, you and I, okay? The Constitution of the United States does not mention corporations.
It does not.
The Declaration of Independence does not mention the rights of corporations. It talks about us as individuals. Individuals have rights, not corporations. That's why I said I think it was a wrong-headed decision on the part of the Supreme Court. And since that decision is made, money has poured into predominantly Republican coffers, but also Democratic coffers as well. And the wealthy have become more influential than they were previous.
So where do you go to be inspired?
Well, I don't have to go much further than my wife for inspiration.
Okay.
She'll tell me to wash the dishes. Okay. Yeah. I don't want to wash the dishes. Okay. So I become inspired and I go write another article.
Okay. And that's a good answer. Now give me another one.
I'm sorry. We ended up going in directions I didn't expect.
That's okay.
All right.
It makes it interesting. So when you just want to, unplug, recharge, and set off in a direction, how do you do that?
If you're talking about life decisions, I always seek new challenges. I've spent my entire adult life challenging myself. I knew from an early age that I was, or I felt, unremarkable. I graduated 313 out of 330 in my high school graduating class. You couldn't get much lower. I was going to spend my life digging ditches. I was going to be a construction laborer. The Army changed all that. The American draft changed all that. I ended up in the Army, and for the first time, somebody told me I had a brain. I tested with the Army, and they said, "Hey, you're half smart." They were the first people to tell me that. And that's when it started. I started challenging myself, and I started with special forces, then ranger school, parachute training, and then I challenged myself in every possible way. Later this year, I hope to start the creative writing program, perhaps at the UK's Kent University in Paris. I've also applied to 7 other programs. We'll see which one I go to. But I have to tell you, this is another challenge. My wife doesn't understand. She at 69 almost, she goes like, "Why do you want to throw more challenges in front of yourself?" And I'm going like, "I don't know, except this lifelong love of learning is or has become a habit."
Yeah, I get that. I get that. My plate is not as full as yours, but my plate is as full as most, and a couple other people too. I am continuously pursuing, and everyone doesn't understand the motivation behind that. I think that's why I like you so much. Although on a few things I've discovered we are very on separate sides of it, but we can have a conversation, which is good.
And one of the things that I enjoyed about both Ronald Reagan and his friend Tip O'Neill, when he was Speaker of the House of Representatives, they were both Irish gentlemen in the old sense, which meant that they were on opposite sides of the political spectrum. But after a day fighting it out in Congress or in the White House, they could actually sit down together, have a meal, have a discussion, talk about their lives, their loves, and those things that were important to them.
Yes.
They weren't enemies. They were opponents. They were political opponents. Also, and this is the thing that I think is most important, what most Americans simply don't understand. The American government was never designed to be efficient or effective. It was designed to do one thing and one thing only. It was designed to ensure that too much power did not end up in too few hands. And I think in large measure, in a little over 200 years, it's done that remarkably well.
I agree. So we've gone almost 45 minutes. It's probably long enough for today. I'd love to have you back again in the future because there's so much we can talk about. For those that do not know, we didn't plug it. So let me throw it up here real quick. I've got to get to it. Robert's got a book that's going to be out shortly, Surviving the United... Oh, no, wait. It came out last year. Yes?
Yeah. Yep. It came out on the 3rd of March last year.
Okay. Surviving the United Nations, The Unexpected Challenge. You can find it at Amazon, Google, and all the regular places. I am sure you should, if you enjoyed today's conversation, you should check out Robert's book. He didn't ask me to do this, but I know after talking to him that this would definitely be an interesting read for anyone. So, Robert, as we turn our sights to the weekend, what words of encouragement do you have for everyone?
The only thing I would tell people these days is that we need more rations. We need more rationality in our political speech. We need to tone down the rhetoric. The fact is that the people on the left and the people on the right are not our enemies. They are other citizens. They have differing perspectives, and that's fine. There's enough room for everybody in America of all colors, all creeds, all religions, okay? All perspectives are welcome in this country. And we should remember that and welcome with open arms all peoples from everywhere and sit down and have a conversation. The fact is, I've discovered in all my travels that people are 99.5% the same. The good news is that geneticists have verified this. The 0.5% difference is how we look, the least important difference of all.
Indeed. Robert, thank you so much for being on the show today and for engaging in a conversation that I didn't know was going to go the directions that it went, but it was lively.
I thought we were going to talk about leadership.
Yeah, well, I think we did talk about leadership. We talked about the challenges of leadership. So everyone else, that was Litvak Leadership Live for today. Erit, thank you for joining us today. And
thank you, Sean.
That's the show. Everyone have a great weekend and be blessed and